welcome to Diplomatic Corner with Premium Times. My name is Nigeria Micheal, and like I said, this is Diplomatic Corner. Like you know, what we do here is to speak to diplomats who are in Nigeria, diplomats visiting Nigeria, and different members of the diplomatic community to talk about their relations with Nigeria and also Nigeria and the world, as well as their countries, to let us in on what happens in their country and allow us to understand better what their countries are about. Today we have at the Premium Times studio the Israeli ambassador to Nigeria, Micheal Freeman, who will be talking to us about Israel-Nigeria relations, Nigeria-Israel relations, Israel itself, and other areas of lessons or shared experiences between Nigeria and Israel. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. I was going to say you look good, but then I didn't want to say, oh, I know.
No, I wasn't going to say that. I was going to say thank you very much, but there you are.
It's good to have you. And you mentioned today's a fasting day in Israel, and we're sorry to bring you out, but it's also you keeping to your own end of the bargain. So thank you very much for doing that. We'll start on with the Nigeria-Israel relations, of course, to ask a few questions. But I must warn you that I'll ask very hard questions.
Okay, so I'll give you some hard answers then, okay.
Good. Okay, so to start with the Nigeria-Israel relations, Nigeria-Israel relations, the innovation fair here in Nigeria between Israel and Nigeria, which is part of our partnership, the third part of it happened just recently, earlier this year. And then the question there is, this innovation fair is to help Nigerian innovators grow and hone their skills and talents. I'd like to ask you, if you were asked to do an evaluation of this initiative, how well, how beneficial, what are the successes recorded so far for you?
The program you're talking about, the iFair program, is for innovators and for entrepreneurs from Nigeria, as you said. We've run 2 in the past, and we're now starting our 3rd one. The actual program is a 6-month program. So we just launched it, as you said, in June. It'll run all the way through to the end of the year till December. And we take primarily young Nigerians who are innovators, who are entrepreneurs, who have an idea and they've got an early stage business plan and they've got an early stage idea that they want to take through. And what we do is we bring across mentors from Israel, we bring mentors from Nigeria, people who understand the space here and all of the different spaces they have. And we work with them for 6 months, and then at the end of that we expose them to finance, and we expose them to the opportunities for investment, and we expose them to market and all sorts of different things so that they can then go out. So the idea of the program is to start to create a young, innovative, entrepreneurial Nigerian class that will start to also build manufacturing of products in here. So we can start to build an economic base within Nigeria, or grow the economic base. How successful it's been is, it's all relative. So we think it's been very, very successful. And what do I mean by very successful? The graduates so far have succeeded in bringing in millions of dollars of investment from outside of Nigeria to into Nigeria. They are creating products, they are providing work. We believe that we've created hundreds of extra jobs so far, and we believe we'll develop to thousands of extra jobs here. We'll start to create increased income, we'll start to create a base. And so I think it's been a very, very successful project, and we're looking at how we can expand it and how we can bring more young Nigerians into this realm.
When you say you have created 100 jobs and developed 1,000, can you help me understand what that means?
Yeah, so I'm saying we've helped develop and create, we believe, hundreds, if not thousands of jobs. Okay. So there are, for example, somebody came along with an idea, the idea that they then worked with our team and developed, and then after that they received $3 million of funding, and through that $3 million of funding, they've had to bring in extra 40 or 50 people to start working on the product. They've had to start developing it. There's the people that from the product, the manufacturing is being done here, so that's created extra jobs, and the transport's created extra jobs. So we know that the actual companies we've worked with have created hundreds of jobs, and through the expansion into the economy, that will in turn create many, many more jobs that will lead to, we believe, thousands of jobs. And as we expand over the year, we hope that iFair 4, which we'll commit to, will be able to grow, and we're working with Nigerian partners, with the TET Fund here, and we've worked with the government, and so it's a true partnership program.
let's do the numbers. How many companies or how many people have benefited? Now, I'm not talking about the jobs created, but people who have been primary beneficiary of the IFAIR.
So the exact number is in the, so far, without the IFAIR 3, we've taken about 80 to 90 different companies through. In the new IFAIR, we're working on 25 different companies, and each company has 3 or 4 people that we work with to do that. And again, we've chosen to keep it small for a very clear reason, which is if you want to be able to give people the real proper mentoring capabilities and the mentoring facilities, then you need to make sure that you've got a small enough group that they can learn together. And you wouldn't want to go to a class of 300 people. So that's why we're going in that number.
Right. And there's another aspect of the fair that will be happening towards the end of the year here in Abuja.
Absolutely. In December, we will have the end of that where they've gone through the mentoring program and they'll have the opportunity to pitch to some funders, and they'll also have the opportunity to show people showcase what they've achieved, and to also get media access so they can start to sell their products.
Yeah, quickly on that, what are the kind of innovations people who have been part of the IFAIR come up with? Are they technological or other areas?
So they're both. They're both technological. Within what we've said is we want to focus on agriculture, on healthcare, on climate change, and on food supply. So those have been the key areas, so that the people who've developed them have come up into those key areas.
Moving further on Israel and Nigerian elections, a Cambridge Analytics investigation found that an Israeli, his name is Tal Hanan, was involved in meddlesome activity around the Nigerian elections of 2015. And big question there is, I mean, the conversation we're having earlier before the interview started, we talked a lot about how Israel is big on technology, a leading country, of course, artificial intelligence, and so it just natural for me to ask the questions about this election and the meddlesome activity. Is Israel aware of this? Is this an act Israel supports?
So I saw the reports like you did. It was covered very widely also in Israel, by the way, that we're talking about an Israeli individual. And as you know, not every country controls every one of its citizens. Its citizens can do all sorts of different things. But the message from us is very clear. We do not get involved in anybody's elections. A democracy is a democracy, and it's for the Nigerian people to be involved and the Nigerian people to decide their future. And we certainly condemn any outside involvement in elections and any outside meddling that's not being done in that way. So we're very clear on that.
Has Israel done its own investigation into this, and are there actions that are going to be taken, or is this something you're just going to leave to float?
So my understanding is that if stuff was done that broke the law, that will be investigated by the Israeli authorities where it's relevant.
Interesting. Pegasus spyware. And again, Israel is the big guy up there with technology, and different countries of the world use your technologies to spy on its citizens, surveillance, human rights questions, journalists. And so are you concerned that, for a country who preaches a lot of democracy and wants to uphold a democracy, and we know that a huge component of democracy is the freedom of expression and a right to privacy. So if you have surveillance, then you've lost this right. Are you concerned that your technologies, your development, what you sell to the world is used in a not so positive light?
Israeli technology is used all over the world, as you know, and cyber is something that is also utilized and used wherever. And I think when you look at what happens with cyber and what happens with technology, you also need to understand the good that's done by that. Our entire lives is online today. Everything is done through technology. This very program is done online. It's Israeli technology that stops those programs from being hacked. It's from the websites that aren't brought down. It's from making sure that critical infrastructure is protected. We know that army and police and healthcare and all of those systems are all protected by Israeli cyber systems. So we're very proud of the Israeli cyber work that we do, the very protection that we do, that when it comes to terrorism and when it comes to people who want to cause damage, those surveillance techniques are very, very important. If someone's going to come and kill you, it's good to know where they are and in order to stop them. So all of that happens. Unfortunately, sometimes that is misused by people and it's abused by people. And we know that all around the world that individuals can abuse news. But I want to really focus on the positive and the amazing difference that Israeli cyber is doing in keeping us all safe. The fact that we're sitting here, the fact that we're able to do what we want to do. Democracy is critical. Democracy is fundamental. Israel's a democratic state. We're a very strongly democratic state. We believe in democracy. We encourage democracy. And so anything that we can do to aid democracy rather than cause it problems is something that we're in favor of.
Yeah, so you mentioned that, you want to focus on the positive on how these technologies have helped life. And I would imagine that a positive for this would also be to see how Israel is tackling the negative use of its technology. So I bring us back to the Pegasus question and the Amnesty International investigation that has showed how this has affected life, the company Ensource. And the question is, has Israel thought about the damage? We spoke about PR earlier for countries. Has Israel thought about the damage this has caused, would cause, now and in the future as well, for Israel's public perception globally? And then is this something, are you thinking to investigate, and so are you thinking to sanction or to put measures in place to serve as deterrence for others?
I know that there are conversations taking place. I'm not going to go into the details of those conversations that are taking place. We know the concerns. We're equally concerned by people who would undermine democracy or utilize tools in order to prevent democracy in any way whatsoever. And we certainly, the government would certainly be looking to make sure that isn't used in that way. What we're focused on, as I said to you, is using cyber in a positive way to protect and to defend people.
Thank you. The next part of this conversation will focus more on Israel, its innovations, and what it exports to other parts of the world, as well as press freedom, human rights concerns in Israel as well. The interview, like I said, we're talking about Israel more and other activities happening in Israel. If you've been seeing the news, you would agree with me that Israel has been in the news, most headlines recently. I want to hear Israel's own perspective of what's happening in her own country. But I'll start soft. One of the new legislations in the parliament has to do with preaching, evangelism in Israel. This is of concern to Nigerians because a lot of Nigerian pilgrims go to Israel, and evangelism is big in Nigeria, as you may have seen. And so, what are the concerns if pilgrims come to your country, which is also part of tourism, and they don't get to do certain kind of activities they are used to, not illegal activities, of course? Are you concerned that you may see a reduction in revenue generated from tourism, for example, and also the friendly relations between you and other countries like Nigeria?
So we have to also, first of all, we need to get through what's rumor, what's true, what's fake news, what's not. So first of all, let me be very, very clear. There's no law that's been passed or going to be passed in any way limiting Christian freedom or anything else in Israel. It's stories and it's not true. I want to be very clear that we have total freedom of religion. We have total freedom of religion in Israel in any way whatsoever. You are allowed to practice your religion. Jerusalem is the home to the three monotheistic religions, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. All have holy places, and all are allowed to go there. I was recently in Israel with a group of a Nigerian businessman and with some other people, and we went to the Western Wall, the holy site for Jews. We went up to the Temple Mount, the Haram al-Sharif. We went to the Church of the Nativity, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and we're in there. And Christians and Muslims and Jews are able to freely practice the religion as they want, how they want, in any way whatsoever. So, we need to be very clear on that. There's no laws to restrict, and we welcome tourists. And I would say, this is the place where Christians can come, where evangelical Christians can come and walk on the same ground that Jesus walked on 2,000 years ago. And when I say the same ground, there are the same pieces of stone on the ground where Jesus walked. You can go and literally tread in his footsteps. You can go where Muhammad went up to when he went up to heaven. These you can all go to. These are the places, and so it's really important for us, and we will always continue to have freedom of religion because it's a fundamental tenet, a fundamental belief of who we are.
So it's not a question of freedom of religion for me, the question I asked. And I'm happy that you are clearing that whole scenario there. It's preaching conversion to whatever religion you believe in. And I don't live in Israel, but this is what the news says. So there's going to be a legislation that stops people from trying to convert, preach conversion to anyone. Is that the case?
So look, as a country, you have to understand the Jewish people's history. The Jewish people haven't had a homeland for 2,000 years. And part of that is that we are a Jewish homeland. We're a homeland for the Jewish people as well as for other people as well. And we welcome everybody to come to our country. But obviously we don't want people coming in and trying to convert the Jews to become Christians, or to convert the Muslims to become Christians, or the Muslims to convert the Christians, or the Jews to convert the Muslims, or that, because it just creates a point of conflict. And so for us it's very important that we have a country where everybody has freedom of religion, so everybody will be free to have their own religion. What we don't want to do is create tension and to create conflict by people saying, why are you trying to convert? And it works across the board everywhere. So that's where we're at and where we're trying to do. This is not about any limiting of anybody's rights or anybody's freedom. If someone wants to come on holiday, they can come on holiday. If you want to preach to the people you've brought with you, you'll absolutely preach to the people. If you want to give a lesson about what's going on, you'll give a lesson. If you want to hear somebody giving a preach, you can absolutely preach in Israel, and there's no law that's going to stop it.
But this is, for visitors, is this strictly to the people you bring with you?
No, it's across the... In Israel, anybody is allowed to preach, and they're allowed, as long as you're not preaching hatred and you're not trying to preach to kill people, you can preach what you like as religious people.
Interesting. And moving over to the judicial reforms, which is seen protests for a very long time now in Israel, and a lot of disruptions there in the economy and all. What is it with trying to, and this is my perception of it, trying to reduce the power of the judiciary and hand some of those to the parliament?
So there's currently a debate, as you said, in Israel about the judiciary. Israel is 75 years old, and one of the questions is the balance between the different arms of the state. And one of the questions is whether or not the judiciary should have some form of reform. Primarily that's to do with the number of cases that are going through the court, to do the makeup of the judges, how it works, what checks and balances there are. And there's a debate going on, and there's a very wide, varied debate in the country. And you should know that there is a consensus that some form of reform needs to take place within the judicial system, whether that's little bit, bigger bit, whatever else it might be. And currently, there's a very active debate. And so you're seeing protests. You're seeing protests in favour of judicial reform. You're seeing protests against judicial reform. And those protests are ongoing. And it's actually an incredible sign of our healthy democracy that anybody can protest whenever they want and know that it's okay to protest, whether you're in favour, you're against, or however it might be. So there's a current discussion going on, and we're seeing democracy in action.
I would ask a yes or no question, then go on to ask the other question. Do you believe in the independence of the judiciary?
Absolutely.
Okay. So now, some part of the law I read wants the parliament to be able to elect judges, and so the question of independence comes in. And there's also the reasonability question for the judiciary. Can you help me speak to these issues?
Certainly. So the issue about judges is, one of the questions is how are judges appointed and how are judges selected and what role. If you look at America, America has hearings for their judges. Their judges are appointed, and then they're appointed by the president. They have to go through the parliament. We don't have a system like that. But there's certainly systems around the world that you can look at in order to have a conversation what the best way is in order to appoint judges and to have independent judges. No one's saying the judges won't be independent. The judges will still be independent. The question is, what's the best way to appoint them in order for us to have a court that more represents the dynamic of the people within the country, so that there is, half are women, half are men. Some are from this country, some are from that area. That you represent every different sector of society. And how is the best way and the easiest way to get that? So that's the real question that's going on. In terms of the question of reasonableness, it's a complicated legal issue to do with what rules, in what way the court can make decisions about government decisions. And there's certain aspects that they've decided over reasonableness that they now can't review based on the reasonable start. Doesn't mean you can't review them for being illegal or for being problematic or for doing that. So it's a small change that's taken place, and now there's a wider conversation about what further changes should happen.
What is your personal opinion about the proposed reforms?
So my opinion is that I am happy to be in a country that you have a democracy where two sides can get up and have a discussion about it. What Micheal Freeman thinks about it is irrelevant, because what's really important is this is a democracy where everybody can have their view. That I know that whatever my view is, I can express it when I'm in Israel. When it comes to the ballot box, I can vote in that way. I can vote because I support the government. I can vote against the government. And regardless of what I do, I can still be an Israeli diplomat, and I can still be an Israeli ambassador, because it doesn't matter if I support the government or I don't support the government, if I voted for them or I don't vote for them, because we're a thriving democracy.
Do you think that a written constitution, a document, would help the situation? Because if I'm not wrong, Israel does not have a written constitution.
We don't have a written constitution. It's a huge debate within the country about whether we should have one. There are many arguments that say yes, there are many arguments that say no. There was a fascinating theory I read recently that said, in order to have a constitution, you need to have a very special moment in time. Because in order to get everybody together, ready to write and to agree on what that constitution is very, very difficult. You know, America managed it because they had a very specific point in time. If you tried now to write the American Constitution, you probably would struggle because you wouldn't be able to get the consensus. And I think that in Israel, to have a constitution would be difficult to get consensus on the level that you would need in order to do that. So there's arguments in favour, there's arguments against, and then there's the practicality of it.
Hard questions. The Palestine question and the occupation of Palestine land, Palestine territory, there's several, conversations about this, and the West Bank thing. So it's a big conversation, and people say Israel is this, Palestine is that. So I want you to speak to the issues. There are several human rights concerns in that conversation, including the Al Jazeera journalist who was killed last year while covering the protests or the incidents happening there. So what is happening in Palestine, the two-state conversation? At what point would that be honored?
We want peace. I'm a father of two young boys. There's nothing that I want more than for my kids to grow up and not have to go to the army, for them to be able to have peace, for us to be able to have peace with our neighbours. In order to do that, we need to have neighbours that are willing to live side by side with us as a Jewish state, and not attempt to kill us, and not fire rockets at us, and not try and blow us up, and not carry out terrorist attacks. No state in the world would accept people firing rockets. No state would accept people trying to attack you, trying to kill you. So when the Palestinians are ready and they're open to having a conversation with us, and us staying there as a Jewish state, then I believe we can solve this problem.
When you talk about rockets and shelling and all of that, I'm forced to ask the question about what is happening in Syria, Israel, Syria, and say, is this not the same scenario of what Israel is doing in Syria?
Well, Israel, according to foreign reports, Syria, we've seen over the last number of years, the Syrian government has massacred its own people and killed its own people, and Iran, which is the biggest destabilizing force in the entire Middle East, and we shouldn't forget that. The Iranian government is trying to, anywhere there's a problem, you'll find the Iranians there destabilizing the area. And Iran is currently trying to move large numbers of weapons, large numbers of missiles, large numbers of explosives, large numbers of other very dangerous weaponry from Iran via Syria into Lebanon to destabilize Lebanon and to give this to Hezbollah, the terror organization in Lebanon. And when Iran is moving those amounts of rockets and those amounts of terror infrastructure, then certainly, according to the reports, Israel is taking action in order to stop it. I would say that destroying a rocket and destroying a missile before it's fired on your children and on your families and on your women is certainly not the same as somebody firing that rocket on you.
And people would say, I've read on social media largely say, oh, this is a narrative Israel uses to, try to shift blames around but itself. So what is your response to this? Is this, typical, trying to shift blame and then change the narrative to make Israel look like a victim, whereas Israel is the perpetrator?
In Gaza, in the Gaza Strip, we forget Israel left. Israel pulled out every single one of its soldiers, pulled out every single one of the people living there. We destroyed all of our houses. We brought every single one of our citizens out in a disengagement plan. And we said to the Palestinians, here's Gaza and Jericho. We gave Jericho as well and said, if you are interested in having peace, show that you can have peace. Show that you can build a society. And if you do that, then we can expand it and move on. And the Palestinians, instead of deciding in Gaza, instead of deciding to move on, they are ruled now by Hamas, a radical Islamist terror organization. And instead of moving to have peace and to have a better life with us, they fire rockets and they fire missiles and they launched suicide bombers and they try and attack us. So we did what we could do. We disengaged from Gaza. Very difficult, controversial decision within Israel, in order to leave, in order to try and bring a better situation, and we got rockets and we got terrorism in response. So, if the Palestinians are serious and they stop their terrorism and they stop the rockets, then I am convinced that we can have a political solution which will be better for all of us.
Is this your own feeling, or this is something the Israel state thinks about and say, we are ready to come to the table to revisit the two-state conversation again?
Israel's been very, very clear. We want to have a better future. We want to come to a peaceful coexistence with the Palestinians. There's no question. That's a very, very clear message. And in order to do that, we need the Palestinians to say they're willing for Israel to exist as a Jewish state. It's all very well saying, well, okay, we'll sit down with you. But if the end game is my destruction, there's not much of a conversation to have with them. If the end of that conversation is, well, okay, you hear what Hamas say. Hamas say they want the end of the Jewish state. They want the end of Israel. No one is willing to sit and say we're willing to have an Israeli Jewish state there.
Interesting. Now, I'd come back to the question about press freedom in Israel, journalism, and this is solely to ask the question about the Israeli journalists, the Al Jazeera journalist, I beg your pardon, who was killed. And now, Israel, as far as I know, until today, has not clearly taken responsibility to say, oh, acknowledge that this happened and this is what we're going to do. So journalists in the line of their duty along the West Bank, for instance, are constantly at risk of dying, of being killed, of being shot by Israeli army or that of Palestine. But in this case, Al Jazeera is saying that the Israeli killed her journalists and nothing is done yet. Speak to justice.
Absolutely. When you're a journalist, and you know this more than I, or the journalist, not me, and you go to cover areas, sometimes when you go into war zones, it's by definition a difficult area. And certainly if you're covering a firefight between an army and a bunch of terrorists, and you're shooting in every direction and there's gunfire going on, it's a very, very difficult and it's a very, very scary situation. And certainly when the people that you're fighting against are wearing civilian clothes and they are hiding amongst civilian populations and they are shooting from within schools or from within hospitals, or they're using children as human shields, it becomes a very, very difficult area. And the Al Jazeera journalist was covering that gunfight and was shot and killed. From our internal investigations, we've said we think it was likely that it was an Israeli soldier that killed her by accident, that accidents happen in a time of war and in a time of conflict, and we're terribly sorry. Journalism is critical. Journalism is a fundamental part of democracy and of freedom, and we want journalists to be able to cover and to continue. Unfortunately, as we see in any war zone, Journalists, unfortunately, can be killed no matter what the best intentions are of anybody. If there's two people fighting and shooting, sometimes somebody can get caught in the crossfire, especially when one side is deliberately hiding as a bunch of civilians.
I'd ask a question bringing us back to Nigeria-Israel relation, and this will be solely on agriculture. Speak to the kind of relationship or partnership you're building with Nigeria around agriculture, especially, within the scope of the climate change conversation and trying to end fossil fuel. And you know that Nigeria is a country whose revenue comes from crude oil, which is a big guy in the fossil fuel conversation. And then we're trying to diversify, say, agriculture is the next best thing. So how are you partnering, helping Nigeria?
So we're really excited on the issue of agriculture. Israel is probably the #1 leader in the world in agriculture. We are the #1 in water management as well, in utilizing water, recycling water, but also in agriculture. You know, cherry tomatoes, the small tomatoes. It's an Israeli invention. Okay, they came from Israel. If you look at all sorts of different areas that we're working in, so that's drip irrigation. We've just developed a technology in Israel. As an ambassador, you learn lots of useless pieces of information. So here's one of them. In order to grow 1 kilo of rice, it takes 5,000 litres of water. Israel has just created, and you have to have a paddy field, right? You have to have a whole area that's flooded, which means you're limited where you can do it, how you can do it, and what you need. So we've just created a technology that allows you to grow rice using only 1,500 litres of water. So you're as opposed to 5,000, and you can grow it anywhere. You don't need a big paddy field, lots of water. You can do it with drip technology. Think about what a game changer that is for countries that rice is a staple food, such as Nigeria. And it means you could grow rice anywhere in the country. So we're in conversations already about how we can share that technology. Over the years, we have trained thousands of Nigerians in how to work in technology. We can now produce more products, a greater yield, using less water, using less soil, and yet less space. So the same space, if I used to use as an example 1 meter to grow a kilo of food, I can now use half a meter and grow 3 kilos of food. So all of that makes a huge difference. We're looking to how our technology will help you when you pick the product, keep it longer before it goes bad, before it goes onto the shelf life, so that you've got a longer shelf life on cassava and all sorts of different things like that. So we were working in that area as well with the government. So there's many areas. Fish farming, we can produce fish farming here to allow fish to grow in different areas, inside the rivers, in the sea, outside, all sorts of different opportunities. So in agriculture, Israel is the only country in the world, you talked about climate change, we're the only country in the world that at the end of the last century, so 20 years ago, had less desert than at the beginning of the century. We're actually turning the desert back. We are literally fighting desertification. And we want to work on the Great Green Wall project. We want to work with Nigeria on reducing desertification. We are looking at alternate energy. Using the sun. You are blessed with the sun all the time here. Let's work together on solar energy so that you don't have to utilize that. Natural gas as a changeover fuel, to be working with you on natural gas. We've also got huge natural gas reserves, and how we can work together in those areas. There are so many areas that we can work together on agriculture and climate change and on fuel in order to diversify and work together. We believe that together, Nigeria can not only feed Nigeria, it can probably feed all of Africa. And so we want to work with Nigeria and with the Nigerian government, with President Tinubu, in order to achieve that and to do that.
And what kind of responses are you getting from the Nigerian government in terms of all this very beautiful thing you're bringing to the table? Are you sensing willingness?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We've obviously President Tinubu's only been in office for 60 days, for 2 months. But certainly in those initial conversations with him and with his government, they've been incredibly positive. We're talking about working together on President Tinubu's vision of 1 million jobs in the digital economy. We've got some projects we're going to be working with him on that in order to work on that. We think that's an amazing vision, and we know that we can partner and we can work together on that. On agriculture, we're going to be working together and partnering. On the economy, we're going to be working together and partnering. On healthcare, on technology, on education, on security as well, because of our knowledge and our expertise in security. So we're really excited about the possibility, and we are incredibly happy and incredibly blessed by the response of the Nigerian government.
Speak to me about the security partnerships you're having with Nigeria. And if you don't mind, I'd like specific details.
I'm sure you would like specific details, but in the same way, I know you're looking for the scoop, but obviously I'm not going to go into specific details because discretion is also important in this area, both for Israel and for Nigeria. But I can tell you that we are having conversations and we are working in other areas. What I will say to you is that we are the world leaders, one of the world leaders in cyber. We are one of the world leaders in tackling terrorism, in tackling instability, in intelligence. And in all those areas, and those are conversations that we will have with Nigeria, with the Nigerian security services, in order how we can help restore security. We will be led by Nigeria on this. This is not an Israeli-led thing. This is a Nigerian-led program where any help we can give, any assistance we can give, any way we can work with Nigeria in order to tackle the insecurity, we are more than happy to do so, and we're having those conversations.
Yeah. Still on security, are you concerned about the Niger coup that just happened yesterday? Especially because Niger is our very close neighbor, and you know the implication of that for our security and also the general insurgency within the sub-region.
Okay, we've spoken about democracy and the importance of democracy and the importance of leadership and being democratically elected. And certainly anything that is going against that and certainly is concerning, and we're watching it. We're watching what's happening there, and I think we need to be clear exactly what has happened, because the information seems to be very sparse at the moment. But from that perspective, obviously, we're concerned by instability in the region, and we're concerned by that dynamic. And we will certainly be having conversations with ECOWAS and with President Tinubu about where we can work on this.
Interesting. Well, at this point, I'd like to say thank you for coming to our interview. But before we go, you've spent a year and a few months here in Nigeria, and to ask you, what foods have you tried? What music do you enjoy? Tell me.
Okay, so my food, I'm limited because I'm an observant Jew. So I'm limited, but I have, obviously, the jollof you have to eat here. You can't not, otherwise I wouldn't be allowed to leave this place if I didn't. Music-wise, every morning I ask on the radio. I put on the radio and I listen to Afrobeat. So I'm listening. I'm not going to just go through and say, oh, I like Burna Boy and I like Davido and I like Ashka. I go through all the names and I start saying it, but I'm listening to it. I'll be honest, I didn't listen to it before I came here. It wasn't my music, but I've got into.
Did you listen to yesterday or the day before?
Honestly, whatever was on the radio. I listen to Nigerian radio in the morning. I don't listen to other music. I listen to Nigerian radio. So the truth is, every so often I'll turn around to my driver and I'll say, okay, what's that? And he'll either say to me he knows or he doesn't know. So I need to have better lessons in my Nigerian music.
Do you know any lyrics? Maybe scarcely in your head.
I'm terrible on that. I mean, really, you need to.
That's understandable.
But by the way, here's interesting. We are working on a joint Nigerian-Israeli film production. So I've got into my Nollywood because I've started to do this, and there's actually a joint film in production at the moment. So that I promise I definitely will see. But I have been keeping up with that as well.
Any slangs? Any colloquial languages you've learned?
I'm not going to do it. I'm not there yet. I pick up every so often. I've been told to use this and use that, but I haven't. I need to start to learn some of the languages. You've got like 200 and something languages,
well,
right?
So the regular, street lingo, you get to hear like the Omo, no wahala, abeg, how you dey. Have you heard any?
I've heard it, but I'm not there yet. I'll tell you what, we'll do another interview in 6 months' time, and I'll make my effort to learn by then.
Okay, thank you very much. It's been a great conversation learning about Nigeria-Israel relations here at our studio from Israel's ambassador to Nigeria, Micheal Freeman. And I'm sure it's been educating for you, as it has been for me. And this is still Diplomatic Corner, where we talk to diplomats who are in Nigeria, visiting Nigeria on different issues. I want to especially thank the Ambassador of Israel to Nigeria for being here at our studio and for giving us his time. Thank you very much for watching, and do not forget to follow us on all our social media handles. Enjoy.